Book 8. The Book of the Gods. So on the earth, the seed that was sown of the centuries ripened. Europe and Asia met on their borders, clashed in the Troad. All over earth, men wept and bled and laboured, worldwide sowing fate with their deeds, and had other fruit than they hoped for. Out of desires and their passionate griefs and fleeting enjoyments, weaving a tapestry fit for the gods to admire, who in silence joy by the cloud and the sunbeam veiled, and men know not their movers. They in the glens of Olympus, they by the waters of Ida, or in their temples worshipped in vain, or with heartstrings of mortals sated their vast desire, and, enjoying the world and each other, sported free and unscourged. For the earth was their prey and their playground. But from his luminous deep domain, from his estate of azure, Zeus looked forth. He beheld the earth in its flowering greenness, spread like an emerald dream that the eyes have enthroned in the sunlight, heard the symphonies old of the ocean recalling the ages lost and dead from its marches salt and unharvested furrows, felt in the pregnant hour the unborn hearts of the future. Troubled kingdoms of men he beheld, the hind in the furrow, lords of the glebe and the serf subdued to the yoke of his fortunes, slave girls tending the fire, and herdsmen driving the cattle, artisans labouring long for a little hire in men's cities, labour long and the meagre reward for a toil that is priceless. Kings in their seats august, or marching swift with their armies, founded ruthlessly brittle empires. Merchant and toiler patiently heaped up our transient wealth, like the ants in their hillock. And to preserve it all, to protect this dust that must perish, hurting the eternal soul, and maiming heaven for some metal, judges condemned their brothers to chains, and to death, and to torment, criminals, scourges of crime. For so are these ant-heaps founded, punishing sin by a worse affront to our crucified natures. All the uncertainty, all the mistaking, all the delusion naked were to his gaze. In the moonlit orchards there wandered lovers, dreaming of love that endures till the moment of treason. Helped by the anxious joy of their kindred, supported their anguish, women with travail racked for the child who shall rack them with sorrow. Hopes that were confident, fates that sprang dire from the seed of a moment, yearning that claimed all time for its date and all life for its fuel, all that we wonder at, gazing back when the passion has fallen, labour blind, and vain expense, and sacrifice wasted. These he beheld with a heart unshaken. To each side he studied seas of confused attempt, and the strife, and the din, and the crying. All things he pierced in us, gazing down with his eyelids immortal, lids on which sleep dare not settle, the father of men on his creatures. Nor by the cloud and the mist was obscured, which baffles our eyeballs. But he distinguished our source, and saw to the end of our labour. He in the animal racked knew the God that is slowly delivered. Therefore his heart rejoiced. Not alone the mind in its trouble God beholds, but the spirit behind that has joy of the torture. Might not our human gaze on the smoke of a furnace, the burning red, intolerable anguish of awe that is fused in the hell heat, shrink and yearn for coolness and peace and condemn all the labour? Rather, look to the purity coming, the steel in its beauty. Rather rejoice with the Master who stands in his gladness, accepting heat of the glorious God, and the fruitful pain of the iron. Last, the eternal gaze was fixed on Troy and the armies marching swift to the shock. It beheld the might of Achilles, helmed and armed, knew all the craft in the brain of Odysseus, saw Deiphobus stern in his car, and the fates of Aeneas. Greece, of her heroes empty, Troy, enringed by her slayers, Paris, a setting star, and the beauty of Penthesilea. These things he saw, delighted. The heart that contains all our ages blessed our toil and grew full of its fruits, as the artist eternal watched his vehement drama, staged twixt the sea and the mountains, phrased in the clamour and glitter of arms, and closed by the firebrand, act itself out in blood and in passions fierce on the Troad. Yet as a father his children, who sits in the peace of his study, hearing the noise of his brood, and pleased with their play and their quarrels, so he beheld our mortal race. Then turned from the armies, into his mind he gazed, where time is reflected, and, conscient, knew the iron knot of our human fates in their warfare. Calm he arose, and left our earth for his limitless kingdoms. Far from this lower blue, and high in the death-scorning spaces, lifted above mortal mind, where time and space are but figures, lightly imagined by thought divine in her luminous stillness, Zeus has his palace high, and there he has stabled his war car. Thence he descends to our mortal realms, where the heights of our mountains meet with the divine air. He touches and enters our regions. Now he ascended back to his natural realms and their rapture. There, where all life is bliss, and each feeling an ecstasy mastered. Thence his eagle thought, with its flashing pinions extended, winged through the world to the gods, and they came at the call. They ascended up from their play and their calm, and their works through the infinite azure. Some from our mortal domains, in grove or by far-flowing river, cool from the winds of the earth, or quivering with perishable fragrance, came. Or our laughter they bore, and the song of the sea in their paces. Some from the heavens above us arrived, our vital dominions, whence we draw breath, for there all things have life. The stone like the ilex, clay of those realms like the children of men, and the brood of the giants. There Enceladus groans, oppressed, and draws strength from his anguish under a living Etna, and flames that have joy of his entrails. Fiercely he groans and rejoices, expecting the end of his foemen, hastened by every pang, and counts long time by his writhings. There in the champaigns, unending battle, the gods and the giants. There in the eternal groves, the lovers have pleasure forever. There are the fairy climes, and there are the wonderful pastures. Some, from a marvellous paradise, 100-realmed in its musings, million-ecstasied, climbed like flames that in silence aspire, windless, erect, in a motionless dream, yet ascending forever. All grew aware of the will divine and grew near to their Father. Grandiose, calm in her gait, imperious, awing the regions, Hera came in her pride, the spouse of Zeus and his sister. As at her birth from the foam of the spaces, white Aphrodite rose in the cloud of her golden hair, like the moon in its halo. Aegis-bearing Athene, shielded and helmeted, answered rushing the call, and the heavens thrilled with the joy of her footsteps, dumbly repeating her name, as insulted and trampled by beauty, thrill might the soul of a lover and cry out the name of its tyrant. Others there were as mighty, for Artemis, archeress ancient, came on her sandals lightning tousled. Up the vast incline, shaking the world with the force of his advent, thundered Poseidon. Space grew full of his stride and his cry. Immortal Apollo shone, and his silver clang was heard with alarm in our kingdoms. Ares' impetuous eyes looked forth from a cloud drift of splendor. Themis' steps appeared, and Ananke, the mystic Erinnys. Nor was Hephaestus' flaming strength from his father divided. Even the ancient Dis, to arrive, dim-featured, eternal, seemed. But his rays are the shades, and his voice is the call of the silence. Into the courts divine they crowded, radiant, burning, perfect in utter grace and light. The joy of their spirits calls to eternal time, and the glories of space are his answer. Thence were these bright worlds born, and persist by the throb of their heartbeats, not in the forms that mortals have seen, when assisted they scatter mists of this earthly dust from their eyes. In their moments of greatness shone those unaging powers. Nor as in our centuries radiant, mortal-seeming bodies they wore when they mixed with our nations. Then the long youth of the world had not faded still out of our natures. Flowers and the sunlight were felt, and the earth was glad like a mother. Then for a human delight they were masked in this denser vesture, earth desires for her bliss. Thin veils for the god through them glimmered. Thrilled were men's days with the throng of the brilliant presences near them. Gods from the wood and the valley, gods from the obvious wayside, gods on the secret hills leaped out from their light on the mortal. Oft in the haunt and the grove they met with our kind, and their touches seized and subjected our clay to the greatness of passions supernal, grasping the earthly virgin and forcing heaven on this death dust. Glorifying human beauty, Apollo roamed in our regions. Clymene, when he pursued or yearned in vain for Marpessa, glorifying earth with a human-seeming face of the beauty brought from her heavenly climes, Aphrodite mixed with Anchises. Glimpsed in the wilds were the satyrs, seen in the woodlands the graces, Dryad and Naiad in river and forest, Oreads haunting glens and the mountain glades, where they played with the manes of our lions, glimmered on death-claimed eyes. For the gods then were near us and clasped us. Heaven leaned down in love with our clay and yearned to its transience. But we have coarsened in heart and in mood. We have turned in our natures nearer our poorer kindred, leaned to the ant and the ferret. Sight we have darkened with sense, and power we have stifled with labour. Likened in mood to the things we gaze at, and are in our vestures. Therefore we toil, unhelped. We are left to our weakness and blindness. Not in those veils now they rose to their skies, but like loose-fitting mantles dropped in the vestibules huge of their vigorous realms that besiege us, all that reminded of earth. Then, clothed with raiment of swiftness, straight they went quivering up, in a glory like fire or the storm blast. Even those natural vestures of puissance they leave, when they enter mind's more subtle fields, and agree with its limitless regions, peopled by creatures of bliss and forms more true than earth's shadows. Mind, that, pure from this density, throned in her splendours immortal, looks up at light and suffers bliss from ineffable kingdoms, where, beyond mind and its rays, is the gleam of a glory supernal. There our sun cannot shine, and our moon has no place for her lustres. There our lightnings flash not, nor fire of these spaces is suffered. They, with bodies impalpable here to our touch and our seeing, but for a higher delight, to a brighter sense, with more sweetness, palpable there and visible, thrilled with a lordlier joyance, came to the courts of Zeus, and his heavens sang to their footsteps. Harmonies flowed through the blissful coils of the kingdoms of rapture. Then, by his mighty equals surrounded, the thunderer regnant veiled his thought in sound that was heard in their souls as they listened. Veiled are the high gods always, lest there should dawn on the mortal light too great from the skies, and men to their destiny clear-eyed walk, unsustained like the gods. Then night and dawn were defeated, and of their masks the deities robbed would be slaves to their subjects. Children of immortality, gods who are joyous forever, rapture is ours, and eternity measures our lives by his aeons. For we, desireless toil, who have joy in the fall as the triumph. Knowledge eternal possessing we work for an end that is destined long already, beyond by the will of which time is the courser. Therefore death cannot alter our lives, nor pain our enjoyment. But in the world of mortals, twilight is lord of its creatures. Nothing they perfectly see, but all things seek and imagine. Out of the clod who have come, and would climb from their mire to our heavens. Yet are the heavenly seats not easy even for the chosen. Rough and remote is that path. That ascent is too hard for the death-bound. Hard are God's terms, and few can meet them of men who are mortal. Mind resists, their breath is a clog, by their tools they are hampered, blindly mistaking the throb of their mortal desires for our guidance. How shall they win in their earth to our skies who are clay and a life wind? But that their hearts we invade. Our shocks on their lives come incessant, ease discourage and penetrate coarseness. Sternness celestial forces their souls towards the skies, and their bodies by anguish are sifted. We in the mortal wake an immortal strength by our torches, and by the flame of our lightnings choose out the vessels of Godhead. This is the nature of earth, that to blows she responds, and by scourgings travails excited. Pain is the bed of her blossoms of pleasure. Earth, that was wakened by pain to life, and by hunger to thinking, left to her joys, rests inert, and content with her gains and her station. But for the unbearable whips of the gods, back soon to her matter she would go glad, and the goal would be missed, and the aeons be wasted. But for the god in their breasts unsatisfied, but for his spurrings, soon would the hero turn beast, and the sage reel back to the savage. Man from his difficult heights would recoil, and be mud in the earth mud. This by pain we prevent. We compel his feet to the journey. But in their minds, to impression made subject, by forms of things captured, blind is the thought, and presumptuous the hope, and they swerve from our goading. Blinded are human hearts by desire and fear and a possession. Darkened is knowledge on earth by hope, the helper of mortals. Now, too, from earth and her children, voices of anger and weeping beat at our thrones. 'Tis the grief and the wrath of fate-stricken creatures, mortals struggling with destiny, hearts that are slaves to their sorrow. We, unmoved by the cry, will fulfill our unvarying purpose. Troy shall fall at last, and the ancient ages shall perish. You, who are lovers of Ilion, turn from the moans of her people, chase from your hearts their prayers, blow back from your nostrils the incense. Let not one nation resist by its glory the good of the ages. Twilight thickens over man, and he moves to his winter of darkness. Troy, that displaced with her force and her arms the luminous ancients,